What if you find yourself in a really dark headspace and it feels like there's no way out? Everything you try, it keeps pulling you back there. The world seems to be falling apart around you, and it almost feels like there's no way out. I think most humans will go through some episodes or seasons in their lifetime that feel like this. We've had a lot of challenges, and I'll talk to those in this episode. My wife's cancer diagnosis in October last year and navigating through that. But what lit the flame for this conversation, I was driving back from Phillip Island with my son Bailey. We went down to visit my brother, and I decided I wanted to listen to something on the way home, and I opened up YouTube, and the algorithm put at the top of my feed a episode of the Straight Talk podcast, which is hosted by Mark Burris, an Australian entrepreneur, with George Calombaris. And I thought, wow, that hadn't been on my conscious radar, but I know that in recent years, George had been through a whole series of major events that have been heavily publicized in the news. And if you're Australian, you'll probably know George as one of the former hosts of MasterChef, a very popular show here. And to give you some context, he had a restaurant and hospitality chain. It was about a $50 to $60 million empire. And he brought in a new business partner, and they wanted to put some corporate governance in place, which is very responsible. They ran an audit and uncovered that they'd been underpaying 49% of their workforce and overpaying 51%. And to try and nip it in the bud, they went to, I believe it's Fair Work, and they reported themselves and said, hey, we're addressing this issue that we've uncovered. And the fallout when that got out into the media was George being labelled nationally as a wage thief, getting lots of personal attacks, people having a go at his family, and being the poster boy for this sort of thing in the workplace. Now, I can't speak for George, but I believe he's very genuine in saying that he would never intend to do that to his team because he loved everyone that worked inside his company. And I know as a company owner with payroll, we want to take care of our employees. Without them, we don't have a business. So based on his personality and who he is, I don't not believe him for a second. I think that's absolutely true. But what happened was when it got out in the media, the turnover of that company dropped by 30% overnight because everyone was boycotting those businesses. So what happened was it couldn't sustain its outgoings, and it went into administration. So he had to sell all his assets, his home, properties, etc., to pay back as many creditors as possible. So he almost wiped the table clean with what he had, from my understanding, and then had to deal with the ongoing scrutiny and label of being a wage thief, which is huge when you're in the media and part of the package, I guess, when things go wrong. Very tough to deal with. And as he said, he went to a very dark place, started drinking a lot and wanted to escape, and sort of felt like there was no way out. Then a incident happened at a soccer match where someone said something very harsh towards his family, and he acted out physically. And then that resulted in a lawsuit for assault that carried several, I guess, other elements to it. And that, he said, cost about $3 million to deal with in legal fees through QC. So George has gone from being on top of the world, one of the most popular personalities in Australia, a food empire, and living his best life with a home in Toorak and family and all these moving parts, to having all that taken away from him and a pending suit that could have very serious legal ramifications for him. And that's a pretty dark place. And what inspired me was him sharing that story and being very open, vulnerable and transparent about that. But what he said was, when he was at absolute rock bottom, he just went back to what he knew. And this was the profound moment for me. So he just went back to cooking. He was originally a chef. So he's not primarily a businessman. That's why he had business partners. He's just a great chef. And he started cooking at 5 p.m. every day and doing his cooking live streamed somewhere online. And what I found very comforting about that was I looked at my situation. You might like to do the same at your world right now and go, hey, there's a skill set that you have that if everything got taken away from you, no matter how bad it got, you can always just go back to that. So for me, it would be writing, it would be content creation. If I had to start from zero and go again, I can always go to that skill set and just start writing and start doing it for other people. And that was very cathartic because it made me feel like even if everything crumbled and went away, there's still a place to easily rebuild. And that's where I would go with that. And I think part of the power too, as a personal brand, to keep it on theme for the podcast, is if you go through a challenging experience and you're able to share that, you can actually turn those events into an asset for you, but also connect with so many people that are struggling through something themselves. So on my side of the coin, what I've had to grapple with in the last 6 months or so with my wife Paula with her cancer episode is I didn't really know how to show up for her. And all these additional responsibilities got parked onto me. So while she's healing, I had to pick up a lot of the parenting slack, taking Bailey everywhere, also taking Paula to all her appointments, and then trying to run this business at the same time that we'd made some big decisions on in the last 12 months. So we'd gone backwards in order to go forwards. And having this restricted amount of time to achieve these, what seemed like big and urgent outcomes, and not feeling like I had space, I became claustrophobic, and mentally I found that really tough. So if you can imagine where you feel emotion, there was a patch on this journey where if you can imagine the top of your head just above your eyes, that's the only place I could feel anything. I couldn't go below there. So there's no way any of that emotional feeling was going to get down into my heart. And that was just a survival mechanism just to get through. And that's very hard too for Paula because I became emotionally vacant while I was trying to help myself survive, where she needed that strong emotional support. So whilst I was doing some of the physical things, taking care of Bailey, taking her to appointments, she knew my mind was absent. And part of the challenge was I didn't want to put any of my fears, any of my scarcity, any of my doubts, any of what I'm processing onto her because she's going through so much with the treatment. It's very physically testing, going through chemotherapy, cancer. Anyone that has been through it, I have so much admiration and respect. You're incredibly brave. And if you are going through something like that right now, I know someone that does, it's no picnic. And it seems like it's never ending when you're going through it. And I'm not even physically going through it. I'm just there watching my wife and seeing your body change shape, losing your hair, your physical appearance, things that so much of society puts stake in. And it's been so much a part of your identity get taken away and then stuck there with your thoughts while you're healing from the process. I can't even imagine what that's been like for her. So I found myself in this place where I wasn't processing my own emotion. And I started going to these very dark places in my head. And I felt at times like there was no way out because of that claustrophobia. Like I didn't have space. I couldn't get done what I needed to do. And I felt like everything was going to crumble and fall down around me. And I wasn't talking or communicating that with everyone. And part of the challenge was everyone was reaching out and everyone's saying, take care of yourself, make sure you get someone to talk to. And that in itself got frustrating. But I realized that was a mirror because I wasn't doing that. I wasn't getting help. And that was part of what was making me angry. But I also, on that note, had to navigate a lot of Paula's friends, a lot of family were coming to me rather than going to Paula to get updates. So I'm processing all that from everyone else and trying to field that despite feeling like I didn't have this time, energy to do everything that I needed to do. And in my head, I want to have the solutions to my wife. I want to keep her safe. I want to provide. I want to solve everything. And that's where the brain was going to in terms of a survival mechanism. So it was extremely challenging. And then I stumbled across a book called The Chimp Paradox. And this is what snapped me out of the hole that I was in really, really quickly. And what it did was draw my attention to the chimp brain. And it's there all the time. It's that what makes me react in traffic. It makes me anxious. And it's there to serve and protect, but it's also irrational. It doesn't deal in facts. It doesn't deal in data. It doesn't do the things that make rational decisions. And that was running the show. But why this book helped is when I realized that that's the case, I realized, well, that's not human as, that's chimp as. So when my anxiety started showing up, when the scarcity started showing up, when the doubts, the fears, whatever it was that I didn't want to feel, I'd start talking to the chimp brain. I go, oh, hey, where are we going with this? And how long are we going to do this for? And just interrupting that snapped me out of those feelings. And when I started to interrupt the pattern, I was no longer sustaining this place of feeling like I'm in a hole. I was jumping out. I would start to go into it, but then I'd snap back out of it really, really quickly. And all of a sudden, I found myself catching myself when I was driving and about to take my anger out on someone on the road that had cut me off or was driving too slowly in the right-hand lane, and just going, well, there goes the chimp. And is that going to make things better? Are they even going to hear me yelling out in the car? Of course not. And how do I actually want to feel and show up in this space? I want to be calm. I want to be happy. I want to set a good example for my son that's in the car. So this book has revolutionized how I've been able to navigate the last month or so, going through this, what I'd say is a darker time in our lives, dealing with something very, very serious. And the good news is the outlook for my wife is really positive. She's responded so well to the treatment. Part of the message is for you to share and use it as an asset if you're going through something, because so many people can relate to it. And I've mentioned it on other episodes. It's so real, and other people might feel the courage to talk about or get support with what they're struggling with. But number two, having a tool, and that's why I recommend the books so heavily, like the Chimp Paradox, they can start interrupting that process. Means that moving forward, when you go to these places, you have something that can help you snap out, or certainly been my experience, and get you back to that place where you want to be. And if you read the book, you'll understand that there's also, if you go to the Diary of a CEO, I think it's Steve Peters is the name of the professor who wrote the book. If you Google Diary of a CEO, Chimp Paradox, there's a couple of podcast episodes on there that talk about this, that are sort of a micro dose, an hour or 1 to 2 hours. And I just wanted to share something that's been extremely helpful for me. And hopefully by sharing a little bit of what happened for George and getting that really powerful takeaway, is you can always go back to what you know. If you have to rebuild or do something from scratch, you've got that thing that you can lean on. Just go back to what you love and know and start there. And if you are in a dark place right now, by all means, feel free to reach out and say, hi, I'm here to help. If you need someone to lean on and you're not quite sure where to go with that. If you've just discovered the show, please subscribe and follow so you can catch future episodes on demand.